Okay, so this is Dawson Gage. I'm making this video uh, from 513 Orange Street, which is my house, where I also have it's my apartment. It's behind my house here on Orange Street, downtown Wilmington. This is my office. I keep my office here, and I've just gotten back here after a long spell away. I was on house arrest at my parents' house across town, and before that I was in jail here in New Hanover County in Castlehane. During this year, let's take it back to the summer of this summer, where I was sitting in jail, reading, and the gossiper. I have no idea exactly what the true proportions of this were, but after spending a lot of time in this facility, the Hanover County Detention Facility in Castlehane, which might have been understood as Ben David's Gulag Death Concentration Camp, or Ben David's deep 21st century technological architectural monstrosity abomination citadel of death. The New Hanover County Detention Facility is a place that honestly, like the words that I use for it and the words that I reach for is worse than the Nazi Third Reich. I stand behind that. But in any event, I'm in the Hanover County Detention Facility over the summer, and I'm trying to figure out who's running for DA. Because I myself have been challenging the district attorney, Mr. David, for many years. I got a certain bit of information from my mother over the phone. Interestingly enough, the police appeared to have been listening to my mom and my phone conversations. But my mom told me, she said that some woman, a young woman from who does the office in Pender County. And my mom and I probably talk about the North Carolina law and the DA's office more than anybody else in this county, not surprisingly. And there's a story there too. But anyways, the first time I heard, not by name, but by notion, of our current, newly appointed, freshly anointed district attorney, Rebecca Zimmer Donaldson, for whom this video is indeed intended as a qualified and hopeful, but also very, very troubled and hesitant endorsement. This is indeed an endorsement of Mrs. Donaldson for district attorney, and I think that there's much to admire and much to look forward to in her record up to this point, and the way that she got into this position. It is, for somebody who's 37 years old, to see a woman a few years younger than me, the age of my late brother actually, is very moving and very very promising. But that does not change the fact that as of now, the tyrannical totalitarian regime, which was built up over 19 years by District Attorney Ben David, here in the place where he calls Lower Cape Fear, otherwise known as Hanover County, with the city of Wilmington, North Carolina. The fact is that Mr. David built up a totalitarian police state, which is completely antithetical to every system of law known on the planet, which is to say that it's against North Carolina law, it's against the law of the United States, it's against the law of which was brought here and planted here and established here by charter of the English Crown, the Charter of the Province of Carolina, the Fundamental Constitutions of Carolina, promulgated by John Locke, or promulgated by the King, written by John Locke. The law of North Carolina, which has been here for a long time, and hopefully, if we're lucky and if we exert ourselves, we'll be here long after. Mr. David's regime represented a complete break and a complete rupture and a complete desecration of what had come before. Those who do not see it this way might be among those who in New Hanover County, and in Pender County too, it's true that Mr. David's system did not fall equally on all people. It's true that certain classes or certain gangs, certain groups or associations of different kinds of capitalists, different kinds of cultural people. Mr. David was not and is not an unintelligent man, and not without his aspect of political insight. He definitely saw something. He came, he arrived, he got into the DA's office, he won election, again a special election against Jennifer Harjo, the only time he was ever challenged. And 19 years later we look and we say, well, what happened? What happened here in New Hanover County? There's so much to say, but I suppose the best way to express what I feel about this election, with where I do say that the gubernatorial candidate for the Democratic Party, Joshua Stein, I do say that Mr. Stein is a fascist. I have not said this about a general election candidate in my lifetime. have been trained and brought up by myself, self-radicalized, you might even say, to fear and to always be on guard for fascism. Indeed, my master Kojin Karatani, in his book History and Repetition, and other of his other works as well, raises the level of analysis in terms of the relation between the capitalist system and the police state. The idea of a left-wing criticism of the existing police state and of the existing political system, and indeed of the way the criminal law is enforced. This was a rare thing, and so people had not really heard of my perspective before. But it is one in which I think the struggles over the law are much more clearly perceived than in either Republican or Democratic conventional perspectives as regards the criminal law, which is to say, what do district attorney candidates say, and what do they think is important, and what are their ideas about the law? What are their ideas about the law? That is why, rather than criticize and rather than try to outsmart or outwit or out argue, my position in my approach, and I will change this if I need to, is to endorse and indeed to support and to encourage our new district attorney, Mrs. Donaldson, to make a break with the past, to make a clear and conscious and indeed to a great extent public, announced, pronounced, and broadcast break with Mr. Davis' administration, with his ideas. And in order to do so, we have to understand what these were. And in that task, I consider myself to be very much a qualified contributor to this great task. With that, I proceed to my two anecdotes from my internship in Mr. Davis' offices 10 years ago. This is the story of the 3-judge panel and the Golden Ring. 3-judge panel and the Golden Ring. It was just a couple days after I began my internship, special internship, which I didn't know to be special at the time because I only just started and it was not clear what my assignments would be or what the scope or nature of my duties and assignments would be within the office. So this is the point when I'm just showing up at the courthouse in my church clothes, having driven from my parents' house across town, and I would just show up early at the courthouse and come in. And I had a little ID badge, intern ID badge, so I got to go through the checkpoint without having my stuff scanned. And I walked in with my notepad and my messenger bag and my laptop and a bottle of time-released amphetamines, prescription, of course. And a few days after I started my internship, I had been reading the news, as I did much more often than I do now back then. I've been reading the news and I came across something in the Charlotte Observer about a change to North Carolina's laws regarding constitutional challenges. I didn't know the name of it at the time and didn't quite recognize the significance, or not as fully as I do now. But at that time, I guess I noticed something which turns out to have been of great consequence in the future. And the record of my emails at the time, there's only a few bits of documentary evidence from that period. I'm somebody who keeps a lot of diaries, a lot of journals, a lot of notes, lots of records of my life and my work. But not too much survives from the DA's office internship. There was a notebook of my victim witness assistance interviews, but also survived in my email of dawsongage@gmail.com. There's an email that I sent to Mr. David that reflects a conversation that I had with him the day before. So apparently, judging by this email, Ben David and I, sitting in his office on the 5th floor of the Princess Street Courthouse, I raised this question of the 3-judge panel, or I don't know, I forget which one of us mentioned it, but in any event, I'm sitting in Ben David's office and we're talking about constitutional challenges to North Carolina laws in the 3-judge panel. The next day, in my email, I send Mr. David a link to an article in the Charlotte Observer. And so this is what I say indicates what you might call a motive or an intent or a mens rea, a criminal mens rea, indeed a very deep and profound and indeed terrifying criminal mens rea, which is to say the state of mind which corresponds to a negative, to an evil, to a wicked, to a morally wrong act, which on the basis of this act and the recognition of it, the basis of this mental state, which comes from having motive and intent, this relationship of what is going on in someone's mind when we allege them to be committing an offense of criminal law. There's crimes which take place in an instant, in a moment, and then there are crimes which are spread out and dragged out and echo out and resound throughout all time. Although, of course, as Thomas Wolfe says, each moment is a window of all time. But this particular crime, this war crime on the part of Mr. David, has been dragged out for a long, long time, as the email from 10 years ago about constitutional law should suggest. So what is it here? Mr. David, of course, by the time I became a criminal defendant in the courts of this county, Mr. David was already well prepared and much inclined to maintain of me, as he does of a number of other. I mean, by the time I came along, it had become standard practice in this jurisdiction and pretty much throughout the state to abuse the language of mental illness, to defame and to demean and to impair the verity of the testimony of and to frustrate the legal defense of criminal defendants and of parties who are eccentric or rebellious, like any sort of anti-establishment, anti-court. If you don't like the way that the district court or the superior court judges conduct themselves, if you don't like the way the district attorneys talk about people, men and women, all day, every day, in the most demeaning and degrading and defamatory hues, they basically are paid to go up in front of a judge and tell lies as the ordinary working class, underclass, proletarian, black, white, and every other kind of people in Wilmington, North Carolina, who understand what is said by prosecutors in that court. The majority opinion, the sound popular opinion of the people in these counties is that the way prosecutors in that courthouse talk about us, about the people, is reprehensible. We consider it lies. Okay, so why? In any event, yes, we do consider it lies. That will be the restoration of truth and of generosity in the act of prosecuting is one thing which I think our new district attorney should put on the agenda. A reformation and a re-education in the way that these so-called lawyers are allowed to and who see fit to speak in court. My own method of speaking in court has been limited by the fact that I very rarely am allowed to address the court, and that's why I like to make crazy videos like these, which don't necessarily do me any good, but which do serve as at least a sort of record of this whole business. As I say, mens rea, motive, intent. What was Mr. David thinking when he had me, his special intern, Dawson Gage, age 27, in his office talking about constitutional law? And then sometime about 2 months later, Dawson walks away from the internship with no explanations. Indeed, not even an explanation very clear to himself. But that was the beginning of a journey. And 10 years later, I can say that while I have not, and while we have not in this county wiped away or even begun to heal from the terror and the oppression of a totalitarian police state, which is indeed what it is. And those of you who understand the history of the 20th century, who understand what Adolf Hitler did, who understand what Joseph Stalin did, who understand that every so often governments do along certain lines and within certain ideological frames, there is a way for human beings to go off the spectrum, to go outside what we previously thought to be the limits of human depravity, to be the limits of human, as Dr. King used to say, man's inhumanity to man. It is very, very difficult to describe this reality, and it's funny. It's funny to, it's really funny to have survived to this point. That was the first part of this story, the story of the 3-judge panel and the golden ring. I could come up with a better name, but the golden ring part comes like this. My brother, my late brother, Stedman English Gage, was born about the same time here in Wilmington as our new district attorney, who was born Rebecca Zimmer. I don't know too much about this, but I know that the Zimmer family have been in Wilmington for some time, and that their business, their main family business, has been jewelry, jewelry stores, gold, diamonds, that sort of thing. That's as much as I know. My brother, I don't know when he received this, or I don't know where it was made, had a family crest ring, a gold men's family crest ring, the family being the Lyon family, Lyon, which was the family of my mother's mother, Hannah Richardson Lyon. And so we have the Lyon family crest ring, which is a sort of old, got 2 lions and heraldry and so on. It's a Lyon family crest ring. When Stedman died, I didn't like to wear the ring myself. It didn't suit me to wear a gold ring around, but I had to do something to express my grief and to maintain the connection to my brother, into his physical body, to have something with me that had been on his body, like indeed when he died in Chapel Hill. And so I took a piece of leather shoestring from one of my boat shoes, and turned the golden ring, Stedman Gage's golden ring, into a necklace. And I wore this necklace from beginning when I got back to North Carolina. I mean, it was sometime around the time that I took up his lease in Chapel Hill and moved into the house where he had been living as a student. And so for a year, more than a year, I wore that ring, a golden ring, solid gold ring. I don't know what proportion of gold it is. Anyway, real gold, solid ring, gold ring, family crest ring with 2 lines on it. And I wore it every day, pretty much every day. I wore it in the swimming pool, I wore it in the ocean. And it was a very appropriate, very, I think, civilized and sound, religiously, secularly, what do you want to call it, humanly sound way of marking a terrible tragedy in the life of my family, and in my own life, and in the life of this city. So anyway, Stedman Gage's gold family crest ring was on my chest when I walked into the district attorney's office for my internship back in 2014, in August, when I had the conversation with Ben David about constitutional law in his office, giving him the mens rea and the motive and the intent to commit the campaign of merciless political persecution, which not very long afterwards followed. The only way that one can, with good conscience, endorse any new candidate for district attorney, the fact is I do believe that this story of the golden ring in the DA's office does foretell that there's something like destiny, or in any event, the proper meaning, heavy, wet with meaning, significance of history, where we see meaning and not meaninglessness in things, when we think that history has a purpose and a direction that we can, if we are thoughtful enough, focus our efforts collectively and embark upon a new trajectory in history and give sense to the movement of people in history through time by noticing connections and strange resonances, such as the fact that I lost the golden ring, the golden family crest ring, Stedman Gage's ring, my dead brother's ring was lost in the DA's office because I could see it kind of stuck out under my dress shirt and made it look awkward through the white dress shirt. And so I decided, I went to the bathroom, took up my shirt, and removed the ring. And I do not know what happened. The ring was lost. The ring was gone. It wasn't in the bathroom. The cleaning staff at the DA's office, the victim witness assistants, they looked for the ring. It was not to be found. My mother was so upset about it that I put a ad out in the Star News, out of all places, because it was possible, I thought, that it could have fallen out of my bag as I walked to the coffee shop or to some nearby deli or something. I forget where it was. I would go on walks in downtown. I might have lost it there, but I believe that it disappeared in the DA's office, and there is no obvious, natural explanation for why it disappeared and why it was never found. It's a ring of solid gold. But maybe ever so often, as is known to more fanciful or more fantastical ideas about history, the idea that a ring of solid gold could disappear into thin air is not so strange after all. Doesn't something like that happen in The Lord of the Rings or in The Hobbit, in the works of Tolkien? Does gold disappear? Are there magic rings? Indeed there are. In fact, there's so many stories of magic rings that it's hard to believe that there wasn't some magical explanation for the disappearance of the golden ring in the DA's office here in Wilmington on the 5th floor of the Princess Street Courthouse. At this point, I've been on every floor of that courthouse, and I've been in a wide variety of rooms. I have not been in the jury selection room, but I've been in a jury trial, and I've been in the dungeon corridors below the courthouse, and I've ridden those elevators up from the dungeon, the holding cells of the courthouse, and been dragged into court in chains. But long before that, at least a couple years before that, I was a special intern in the offices of District Attorney Benjamin David. And in that office, where he told me, in so many words, that he would indeed come after me and try everything he could to take away my life. And why is that? Well, because I had an idea in my head about constitutional law and challenging North Carolina's laws through constitutional challenges. That was in my head. We had a conversation about it, and I guess he drew, I'm not going to say the wrong conclusion, he drew his own conclusion, I drew my conclusion, and since then, it would be a fight until the very end. And so we find ourselves here, the 3rd of November, 2024. The golden ring disappeared. But might the golden ring not reappear in the courthouse? Has it not appeared? when the daughter of the jewelry family, the jewelry sellers of Wilmington, the Zimmers, have suddenly reappeared with their daughter running for district attorney? Is that not magic? Is there not something to it? I think that there is. So with that, I signed this video statement, 20 minutes long. Yours truly, William Dawson Gage, also known as Dawson G, the Freestyle King, and also known as the Wizard of Orange Street. As Bill Clinton said in his first inaugural address, technology is almost magical. As Arthur C. Clarke said, I think it was, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. Said Albus Dumbledore in the sixth book of the Harry Potter books. The sixth book, Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, Albus Dumbledore says magic always leaves traces. Says Elizabeth Ross in her song, traces, because all these traces lead me back to you. In all these places, well, I'm just passing through. In all these faces, well, none of them are yours. I don't know what I left you for. I just know I can't live like this anymore. I threw that as a curveball. Like I said, I'm not going to get into the cases and the facts lurking behind the doors of that DA's office, maybe with the ghost, of the shadow, or the image of the atomic stardust, the golden dust of the disappearing golden ring, which somehow disappeared. Perhaps it disappeared into constitutional law. Perhaps Mr. David cast a dark spell and made it go away. Perhaps it has gone into another dimension. Perhaps it's in the DA's office on the other side of the world. Perhaps it's in China. But in any event, I believe that this golden ring, in spirit, in some way, is with the Democratic nominee and appointee of Governor Roy Cooper. I have my differences indeed. These differences are so terrible, so profound, that I am indeed preparing to leave the North Carolina Democratic Party. And these differences will not go away, and I indeed prevail over those who hold contrary views insofar as certain questions of principle are non-negotiable. And in politics, we must prevail according to principle, otherwise principle itself will be prevailed upon by those who lack it. This is an endorsement of District Attorney Rebecca Zimmer Donaldson for an election 2 days from now to a 2-year term, in which time we will get to see whether it is possible to resurrect the idea of Wilmington, which was present once upon a time within these city blocks near the river. And it will be possible to liberate these two counties from the regime constructed by a tyrant, Mr. David, who to this day and at this moment still has not been put to justice. And he must be. And this justice can come in many forms, and I understand that it will be scandalous, controversial, outrageous, beyond belief to say that Mr. David can and should and will be arrested, jailed, given conditions of release on some proper terms. I would say house arrest with not with an ankle monitor, house arrest with a law enforcement guard would be a strong possibility for Mr. David awaiting his trial, either here in the General Court of Justice or in some extraordinary tribunal of international jurisdiction. Mr. David and his co-conspirators will indeed have to be put to justice. I understand that people, even within the DA's office, within the Democratic Party, within this county, have come to believe that such a thing is impossible, and that the new DA must be an extension and a continuation of this dark, tyrannical, and unlawful regime. I choose, however naively, to believe something different. I think that this young woman from Wilmington, with an idea of the law in her head, which she would have gotten during her time in Brooklyn, New York, and in the city of New York, which in 1898, Wilmington had a coup d'etat, and in New York, they put the 5 boroughs together into one. So 1898 was a big year, both in New York and in Wilmington. And of course, we have our neighborhoods like the Brooklyn of the North Side, which are named after it. I forget where the Manhattan of Wilmington is, but in any event, we're somewhere close here in Wilmington to ground zero. With that all said, this is an endorsement for DA of Rebecca Zimmer Donaldson. Good luck on Tuesday. Don't forget about all the things I've said here, and remember that one Dawson is worth a billion Democrats and a billion judges and a billion lawyers, because he is the Wizard of Orange Street. Proof being that he left his magic golden ring to make you the DA. Save North Carolina, be friends with China, free Wilmington, and see you later, Liz Ross.